Hello. So what I'm doing today is a review of the Gosund Smart Plug. Now what I am using this for is for my aquarium lights, and for my saltwater tank I'm using it for a refugium light. So I have a bubbler light and the main display light on my freshwater tank, and then a refugium light I use for growing macroalgae on my saltwater tank. Now, the reason that I ended up looking into these in the first place was because originally I started out with a couple of mechanical timers. I had a $4 cheapo one from Walmart for my freshwater tank display lights, and then I had a $10 one from Lowe's or whatever for my saltwater tank. So what ended up happening was I just found so many drawbacks with the mechanical timers I was using. I would run into situations where I would set the light for a certain set time, and it could have as much as a 10 to 15 minute lag on it. In addition to that, it would periodically get stuck, where it would literally be on all the time or it would be off all the time, and I would have to manually go in, unplug, reset it before I could get it running again. I would also end up in situations where when I would go to do a water change and I'd have to kill the power, where after you do that a couple of times, you might be as much as an hour off on the mechanical timer if you don't go and reset it manually each time. So it just reached the point where they were just really cumbersome, not really very effective at doing their jobs, which is maintaining consistent light schedule, which is what I need for the applications that I'm using these for. So what I ended up doing was going and looking around for a cost-effective alternative for the lighting that would be more consistent. And so I started looking into smart plugs and just seeing what was out there. And the first thing that came up, as far as one that was very cheap but also highly reviewed, were these Gosund Smart Plugs. So the first one, I went ahead and just bought a single just to try it out, and it ended up being a bit more at about $7, but given that I was on $4 at the low end for a mechanical timer and $10 on the high end for a mechanical timer, it fit right in between there, so I figured it was pretty reasonable. So as you can see here, I've already got the app pulled up here, and as you can see, it's got the sump light in particular already up and running. Now I'm showing this main display page here because normally what'll happen, if you look up here, it'll give you your list of smart plugs, especially if you got multiple ones up here, and it will generically list them as smart plug, smart plug 1, smart plug 2. So I highly recommend going in, because you can relabel them as you can see here, and relabeling the plugs as soon as possible. That way it's a lot easier to keep track of them if you got multiple things going, and making sure you're getting the right light schedule on the right plug. So first thing I would recommend doing, of course, is relabeling the plugs once you go into the app. The app is available on the App Store for those who have iPhones, and of course the Google Play Store for those of you folks on the Android system. So as you can see here, they have an option for each light. You can go ahead and select that. You can manually turn it on and off just by pushing the power button there. I don't really want to do that right now because it tends to, mess with things in the tank. But you can manually turn it on and off just to test it out. And I do recommend becoming very familiar with this, the sort of, pencil or pen icon up here, and going ahead and pushing on that. This is where you would come in and you would push once again that little sort of pencil pen icon, and that's where you can relabel the lighting. So that's important to know. Also really important to know is this device information part. For those of you folks who use or are on what they call the Mac enabled security networks, this is crucial, and unfortunately this is the one drawback and the one gripe I have with Gosund. If you take a look at their plugs, you can see here there is a bunch of writing on it, but unlike a lot of devices, there is no MAC address listed on these things. And the same is true of the box and the manual, the instruction manual. There's quite simply is no MAC address listed. So unfortunately, what you're left with is to take these plugs, go to a non-Mac enabled network, go ahead and register it, set it up on there, and then you can go ahead and come in here in the app and push device information, and then it will bring up the MAC address. And then you can either, write it down, copy and paste, whatever you want to do with that. And then go ahead and register it with the Mac enabled network, and it'll work fine. With mine, what I did was I simply temporarily disabled the Mac security feature, got the addresses off of all the plugs, and then went ahead and registered them and re-enabled the Mac network, and so now it's working on it. But just kind of a pain. It would make it a lot easier if Gosund would simply put the MAC address on the plug or on the manual, the box, or something there. Just as an alternative method for getting it there, because you can't hook up to a Mac enabled network without the MAC address, and it kind of defeats the purpose of you having to kind of circumvent that in order to register it first before you can possibly get the MAC address, which to me is counterintuitive. So anyways, once again, make sure you're aware of that with these things. You have to kind of, jump through a few hoops, but it does work. And once you get it all set up, then you're good to go. And it's no problem whatsoever to use these plugs on a Mac enabled network. So just be aware of that though. So these things are just, very cost effective. I bought this 4-pack here because I like the first plug so much for, I think they were about between $20 and $22 on sale at Amazon. So I think I ended up spending, or it came out to roughly about $5.50 a plug. You're not going to be able to find that kind of consistency for lighting in anything that costs this little otherwise. So the other thing that's really nice about these plugs is that if the power is killed, they automatically, when the power comes back on, will automatically resync and reset and continue to run schedule. These things are very consistent. Gosund says give them about a 30-second delay or grace period on their their activation. But given that I was dealing with a 10 to 15 minute offset with the mechanical plugs, I would say that is very reasonable to deal with only a 30-second, offset of the actual time. So when I hook these things up, it's really interesting because I have my freshwater bubbler light and display light running on the exact same cycle. And it's funny because the bubbler light comes on, and then about 2 to 3 seconds later, the display light comes on. And then conversely, at night, the bubbler light will kick off, and then the display light will kick off about 3 seconds later. So they're offset by about 2 or 3 seconds. But realistically, I mean, as I said, that's really marginal. I can think of very few applications where that would be an issue. So just be aware there can be a tiny little bit of lag, but you're going to find that with anything. So I would say it is well worth it. All in all, this has been a great purchase. Would I recommend them? Absolutely. It has made things a lot easier for me. And in addition, for those of you folks who may be on the saltwater side of the hobby, the consistent refugium lighting schedule that I have finally gotten with these has made a fairly significant impact with how my corals are doing in my tank, because as you know, when you're not having a consistent lighting schedule, you can get your pH messed with in your tank, and then your corals aren't as happy. So that's all I've got, and thanks for watching.